Tonight, we begin with one of ancient Rome's more unusual professions, the orgy planner. Yes, someone had to schedule the wine, supervise the grapes, organize the entertainment, and make sure no one accidentally brought their mother-in-law. It might sound absurd, even decadent. But Roman feasting culture wasn't just about indulgence. It was about power, status, networking, and, well, quite a bit of nudity. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be the person responsible for turning a senator's boredom into a night of legendary debauchery? To juggle guest lists that read like a powder keg of rivalries, to arrange seating so that enemies don't stab each other over the olives, to ensure the wine flows but not too fast, and to manage the delicate art of the post-feast activities. This was not a job for the faint of heart. It was a job for a master of logistics, psychology, and discretion. Tonight, we will follow a Roman orgy planner through his day, from the anxious pre-dawn hours to the chaotic, perfumed, unforgettable night. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into history's strangest corners, take a moment to subscribe to Little Historical. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, perhaps a blanket, and let us begin. Your eyes open before sunrise. Not because you're disciplined, because you're anxious. You're the planner of tonight's elite Roman orgy, which means your brain has already conjured 17 things that could go wrong before breakfast. Your sleeping mat is still warm. Your tunic is wrinkled, and someone has already shoved a scroll under your door. It crackles ominously. You unroll it with the grim resolve of a soldier reading his draft notice. It's from your patron's wife, who would like to remind you that last time the rose petals were yellow, not red, and guests noticed. You haven't even touched your barley yet. Outside, Rome is just waking up. But you're already juggling flaming amphory in your mind. Today's guest list includes senators, artists, philosophers, 2 courtesans who hate each other, and rumor has it, someone from the imperial family. Of course, no one tells you who. Could be a cousin, could be Caligula. Either way, you'll be blamed if someone's peacock isn't sufficiently massaged. You step into your sandals and begin the day like any good Roman orgy planner, with dread and a clipboard. First order of business: staffing. You sent runners yesterday to book flute girls, dancers, a harpist, and a man who walks on his hands while balancing a tray of figs on his feet. None have confirmed. You suspect at least 2 are currently drunk in the Subura. Then there's the food. You've requested oysters, honey-roasted dormice, figs, dates, olives, and several questionable meats from the eastern provinces. Everything must arrive fresh, or at least freshish. One bad oyster, and half the forum will be whispering that you poisoned Senator Glabrio. Oh, and don't forget the cushions. Last time, one of the couches collapsed under a toga-heavy magistrate, and the fallout was political. This time, the couches must be sturdy enough to handle whatever happens on them. And you know exactly what happens on them. The sun is barely up, and you're already sweating into your linen. You take a breath. You remind yourself you are a professional, a maestro of madness, a choreographer of chaos. It's going to be a long day, but the cushions will be fluffed, the wine will be poured, and the guests will never know how close you came to screaming. Not yet, anyway. It's still early, and already you're unrolling a fresh scroll. Today's updated guest list. You read it slowly, bracing for disaster. It's not a seating chart. It's a delicately balanced social powder keg, with olives on top. And that, dear listener, is just the morning. The real tension begins when you start placing names on couches, and that is where our story turns next. The real tension begins when you start placing names on couches, and that is where our story turns next. But before the guests recline, before the music plays, there is the menu. And the menu, for a Roman orgy, is not merely food. It is a statement of power, a weapon of seduction, and a logistical nightmare rolled into one. You walk to the kitchen, where the head cook, a freedman named Marcus, is already shouting at a slave who dropped a tray of oysters. Marcus is a genius with sauces, but his temper is legendary. You present tonight's plan, a cena of 7 courses, not too many. Your patron wants elegance, not gluttony. But each course must have a surprise. The appetizer, fresh oysters from the Lucrine lake, served with a mulled wine sauce that stains the lips and loosens the tongue. Then a salad of rocket and endive with a honey dressing, sharp, sweet, an invitation. Then the gustaccio, a light course of eggs and pine nuts, meant to whet the appetite without filling the belly. The main event, a roasted wild boar stuffed with dates and fennel, surrounded by a moat of garum, that infamous fermented fish sauce that Romans adore and modern noses recoil from. The boar's tusks are gilded, its eyes replaced with cherries. When the slaves carry it in, the guests will gasp. Then a palate cleanser of sorbet made from snow brought down from the mountains, a luxury that whispers of wealth. Then the secundi mensi, the second table, where the real decadence begins, honeyed figs, fresh dates, poppy seed cakes, and a massive platter of dormice rolled in honey and poppy seeds. The crowning glory, a live flamingo, roasted and then re-feathered for presentation, its neck twisted into an elegant curve. But the true art lies not in the dishes themselves, but in their timing. Too fast, and the guests fill up before the entertainment. Too slow, and they grow restless, their hands wandering before the wine has done its work. You instruct Marcus to send the oysters the moment the first guests recline, to follow with the board just as the poet begins his recitation, and to hold the dormice until after the pantomime. The wine, too, must be managed. Tonight's vintage is a special mulsum from the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, sweet, thick, and potent. You order it watered down for the first hour, so the guests remain coherent enough to appreciate the dancers. After that, the full strength will flow, and what happens after that is not your responsibility. You take a sip of the undiluted wine, warm, honeyed, dangerous. It tastes like a promise. And as the kitchen buzzes with the chaos of preparation, you know that the evening's success depends not just on the food, but on the mood it creates. And that mood begins with the first bite. But the food is only half the story. The entertainment, after all, is what they will remember. And that, dear listener, is where our next hour begins. And that, dear listener, is where our next hour begins. You walk to the peristylum, the columned courtyard where the performers are rehearsing. Tonight's lineup is ambitious, and your nerves are already taut. First, a Greek lyre player to accompany the appetizers. Soft, melodic, forgettable. Then a troupe of Spanish dancers, not the gentle kind, but the athletic, castanet-clicking sort that leaves guests breathless and clutching their wine cups. Then a poet from Alexandria who specializes in erotic verse, his expensive, dramatic, and prone to weeping if the audience doesn't applaud. You've stationed a slave nearby to clap on cue. Then a juggler who can balance flaming torches while riding a unicycle. You've seen him perform at a Saturnalia feast. He's skilled, but the torches make you nervous. One spark, and the silk curtains become a funeral pyre. You've positioned a bucket of water behind a column, just in case. You've also hired a pair of acrobats, brother and sister from Syria, who can contort themselves into shapes that make the audience both applaud and blush. Their act is intimate, almost unsettling, and you've scheduled it for after the second wine course, when inhibitions have softened. Finally, the pièce de résistance, a pantomime of the Judgment of Paris. 3 beautiful actresses, dressed as Juno, Minerva, and Venus, will compete for the golden apple, while a handsome slave as Paris looks on. The performance will end with a tableau that leaves little to the imagination. The slaves playing the goddesses have been rehearsing for weeks. You've had to replace one who fell in love with the stage manager. The lead actress, the one playing Venus, has a reputation for improvisation. You've warned her, no ad-libbing. Last time she added a kiss that wasn't in the script, and the senator's wife fainted into the fish sauce. You check the lighting. The oil lamps must be positioned to highlight the dancers without blinding the diners. Too bright, and the floors are visible. Too dim, and the guests squint. You adjust a wick, then another. The musicians are tuning their instruments, the lyre, the double flute, the small drum. The flute girl is new, her fingers tremble. You offer her a sip of wine and a quiet word. She nods, calmer now. As the sun begins to set, you take a final walk through the triclinium. The couches are plumped, the cushions aligned. The servers know their cues. The dancers are oiled and ready. You take a deep breath. The entertainment is the soul of the feast, not just decoration, but seduction. And tonight, you have planned a seduction that will be whispered about for years. But even the best performance can be ruined by a misplaced guest, a jealous lover, a political rival seated too close. That is where the real art lies, not in the dancers, but in the seating. And that, dear listener, is where our final chapter begins. But the food is only half the story. The entertainment, after all, is what they will remember. And that, dear listener, is where our next hour begins. You walk to the peristylum, the columned courtyard where the performers are rehearsing. Tonight's lineup is ambitious, almost reckless. First, a Greek lyre player to accompany the appetizers. Soft, melodic, barely noticed. Then a troupe of Spanish dancers, not the gentle kind but the athletic, castanet-clicking sort that leaves guests breathless and reaching for their wine cups. Then a poet from Alexandria who specializes in erotic verse. He is expensive, temperamental, and worth every cestus. Then a juggler who can balance flaming torches while riding a unicycle, a feat that has gone wrong only twice before, and both times the resulting chaos was, in retrospect, entertaining. You've also hired a pair of acrobats, brother and sister from Syria, who can contort themselves into shapes that make the audience both applaud and blush. Their finale involves a single oil lamp and a series of poses that leave little to the imagination. But the pièce de résistance, the act that will be whispered about for months, is the pantomime of the Judgment of Paris. 3 beautiful actresses will play the goddesses, Juno, Minerva, and Venus, each vying for the golden apple. A handsome slave will play Paris. The performance will end with a tableau that leaves the audience in no doubt as to Venus's victory. The slaves playing the goddesses have been rehearsing for weeks. You have had to replace one who fell in love with the stage manager. The other 2 are now eyeing the new recruit with a mixture of jealousy and professional curiosity. You watch the acrobats practice, their bodies glistening with oil, their movements synchronized as if by magic. The poet sits in a corner, scribbling revisions, muttering to himself. The lyre player tunes his instrument, the strings humming like a lover's whisper. You check the lighting, too bright, and the magic fades. Too dim, and the guests will trip over the couches. You adjust a lamp, then another. The shadows now fall just so, casting the dancers in silhouette, making the acrobats seem to float. You nod, satisfied. But even the finest performance can be ruined by poor timing. You must coordinate with the kitchen. The poet should begin just as the guests finish the oysters, when their tongues are sharp but their tempers still mild. The dancers should perform during the main course, when the wine has loosened inhibitions but not yet erased memory. The pantomime must come after dessert, when the candles are low and the couches have begun to shift closer together. You signal the stage manager. He nods. The performers take their positions. The lyre player plays a single, haunting chord. And somewhere in the triclinium, the first guests are already reclining, their hands reaching for the wine. The entertainment is about to begin. But the night is young, and the most delicate work, the management of the guests themselves, is yet to come. That is where our final chapter begins. End of thinking of the night is young, and the most delicate work, the management of the guests themselves, is yet to come. That is where our final chapter begins. By the 2nd hour after midnight, the party has reached its peak. The wine has flowed freely, the dancers have retired, and the pantomime has left the audience in a state of pleasant bewilderment. Some guests have retired to the cubicular, the private rooms prepared for exactly this purpose. Others are dancing to a lyre in the courtyard, their movements growing slower, more intimate. A few are snoring on their couches, their garlands askew, their togas loosened. You move through the triclinium like a ghost, adjusting a lamp here, refilling a cup there. The widow who demanded to be seated far from her enemies is now flirting with the deaf merchant, who seems to have learned sign language from a previous event. The senator's son and the lyre player have disappeared together. You make a mental note to ensure the lyre player is paid extra. The courtesan has the young tribune eating from her hand. Literally, she is feeding him grapes, one by one, while whispering something that makes him blush even in the dim light. You allow yourself a cup of the good wine, undiluted. It warms your chest and loosens the knot in your shoulders. Gaius, your patron, finds you in the corner. His eyes are bright, his toga loosened, his laurel wreath slipping over one ear. Lucius, he says, clapping you on the shoulder, you have outdone yourself. I have never seen such a feast. Such entertainment. He gestures vaguely toward the courtyard, where two guests are now attempting to reenact the Judgment of Paris with a potted palm as the golden apple. The consul's wife asked me for your name. She wants to hire you for her daughter's betrothal feast. You bow modestly, but inside you are already calculating the fee. Gaius presses a leather pouch into your hand, heavy with coins, more than you expected. There is more tomorrow, he says. Now go. Rest. You've earned it. You thank him and slip away through the servants' passage. The night air is cool on your face, a relief after the perfumed heat of the triclinium. The stars are out, bright and cold. You walk to your small room behind the kitchen, kick off your sandals, and collapse onto your bed. The sounds of the party fade into a distant hum. Laughter, a lyre, the soft closing of a door. Tomorrow, you will settle accounts, apologize to the mosaicist for the wine stain on the Neptune mosaic, and start planning the next event, a wedding, perhaps, or a celebration for a returning general. But for now, you sleep. And in your dreams, you are reclining on a purple couch, eating honeyed figs, and laughing at jokes you don't have to arrange. The orgy planner's work is never done. But tonight, at least, it is done well. And as the first light of dawn creeps through the shutters, you smile in your sleep. Tomorrow, another scroll will appear under your door. But tomorrow is not yet here.